Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Division video, and in today's video, following directly on from the one that I did last night on the Phase 3 PTS changes, we now have a full set of patch notes with percentage values for all of those alterations. So as promised, I'm going to follow up on that video to give you guys a little bit more granularity. So if you guys do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions, and as always, if you guys want to read them for yourself, then you can also find the patch notes linked down below. But kicking things off, we're going to start by talking about changes to Last Stand. Bear in mind, everything that's listed here is specifically for Last Stand, so these are not global PvP changes. These are just for if you're playing in the Last Stand game mode. One of the things that people mentioned quite a bit was that time to kill on downed players was quite long, to the point where you were often forced to run up to melee range to punch them, which of course brought you out of cover, brought you out of kind of where you were beforehand, often putting you in harm's way. So one thing they want to try in Phase 3 is adjusting the time to kill on players in the downed state. So they're basically going to be reducing your downed state health by 50%. This basically means that when you're in this state and you're dropped on your knees, you'll be killed twice as fast if people are shooting you. Of course, melee isn't going to change, you can still go up and punch someone once and they're dead. But it means if you are staying at range, maybe you've managed to successfully kill someone from cover, then you're hopefully going to be able to kill them without having to put yourself in a dangerous position. That's of course the aim. Bear in mind this is still PTS, so if people don't like it, maybe it makes it impossible to revive, then they'll of course revisit this change. Also, another issue was the scarcity of medkits as a whole. They said it was kind of hard to find them in Last Stand, so what they're now going to be doing is granting people a maximum of 5 medkits every time they respawn. So if you die, you'll always respawn with full 5 medkits as opposed to kind of, having slightly fewer, which sometimes hinders your survivability. Furthermore, they've also lowered the health of skill proxies, and what they mean by that are effectively skills that are companions for you, so seeker mines, support stations, turrets, stuff like that, and the idea is that they are then easier to kill. They will still be potent, so they haven't necessarily touched their damage, but it basically means that if you can be run upon by seeker mines or you see a turret, you can take it down a little bit easier than before. They've dropped the health by 50%, again, only in Last Stand, so if you're in PvE, or if you're in the general dark zone, this won't of course take effect, but for the purposes of Last Stand, items like that will have 50% less health. And just to be clear, that is specifically support station, turret, and seeker mine. Then as for normalization, I mentioned yesterday that they wanted to try and tweak it a little bit. They wanted to kind of basically give a little bit more value to the major bonuses. So the breakdown of the changes are as follows. They've reduced the set armor damage mitigation by 50% from 70% to 35%. Armor will now respect talents and skill buffs. Major and minor bonuses are no longer normalized and apply as normal in-game, so if you have specifically gone after some major bonuses, they will actually have a lot more value in Last Stand. And all weapon stats will now roll at maximum, such as the headshot damage bonus on marksman rifles. So they are the changes in Phase 3 normalization. Now do bear in mind they are testing extremes, so if people feel that this is not necessarily the optimal way, of course give feedback, and they can then hopefully find a happy medium between, Phase 2 and Phase 3. But for the time being, that is how normalization will work in this week's PTS. As for personal score, again, while in the Last Stand game mode, they want to make it so that people that are both PvEing and PvPing can sort of compete on a relatively even footing. So with that in mind, they've reduced the amount of score earned from additive kill marks, i.e. headshots, low health and explosives. They've also reduced the amount of score earned from Last Stand assist marks, so being near a friendly as they capture an objective or they turn on a fortification, etc. And they've also reduced the amount of score earned from healing a teammate by 50%. So hopefully that means if you're kind of a PvE player, you can of course still compete with those PvP players, at least on the score front. Mercy Rule, they've now turned the Mercy Rule to begin activating when there are 8 minutes left in the match, and if there's more than a 7,500 point spread, so basically if you're kind of completely dominating the team, that is when the Mercy Rule will kick in. And then finally a note on spawning, to basically help deter spawn camping. They've now added additional spawn points and updated the spawn logic so that points outside of a player's designated home spawn area can be used if there's too much enemy threat. So if someone's sitting in your base, sitting in your kind of spawn zone, you can select something else and you won't then be gank fuel. So all of that, as mentioned, is just for Last Stand. So any of the stuff that was kind of PvP related, remember it's just for if you loaded the Last Stand game mode. The Dark Zone PvP will remain unchanged. Moving on now to game changes. First up, in order to avoid having to add extra health specific for Last Stand and maintain the 35% armor cap, they've decided to tune the PvP damage modifier to achieve the desired time to kill. The idea behind this change is that it will help survivability for players in both Last Stand and the Dark Zone, and the other idea is that it will make playing your character feel more consistent both inside and outside of Last Stand. So with that in mind, they've reduced the PvP damage modifier by 21% from 0.58 to 0.46. This applies to both the Dark Zone and Last Stand. They've also reduced the medkit cooldown back to its original 12 seconds instead of 15, because in light of the kind of changes I spoke about yesterday, in the way that medkits no longer provide an overheal but they can be used to cleanse status effects, they feel that with these changes people can access them slightly more frequently without it being broken. So long and short of it is, you can use your medkits slightly more frequently. Also, again, as mentioned, players will now be able to reload while sprinting. Once again, they tried it, they didn't like it, so they got rid of it. So once again, reload sprinting is back, and all damage resilience has now been capped at 60%. After that, a few changes on the weapons. Some of this I spoke about yesterday, but the Provident Talent, the last bullet of the magazine, deals 10% more damage instead of 60%. For Caduceus, they have implemented a 0.2 second cooldown between each of the Caduceus' heal proc. So in other words, if you're running with a team of people using the Caduceus, you won't be able to heal indefinitely. There will still be a little delay between each heal to try and sort of balance this out. And they've also made a change to the actual talent so that it now heals for 1% of the user's skill power as opposed to 1% of the receiver's health. So again, if you want to use this, you now have to be a skill power player. You have to spec for it. So if you have very low skill power and you throw on Caduceus, it won't be anywhere near as useful as if you had a higher skill power build. The Medved, they've reduced the stagger from this weapon's damage. The Tenebrae, its talent now has a 10-second cooldown. That's the one where, of course, if you shoot a destructible weak point on an enemy, it refreshes your skills, so there is now a cooldown on that. And the Historian, the explosive damage will now equal 500% of the user's firearms as opposed to skill power, so it's now switched from being a skill power weapon to a firearms weapon. As for gear sets, nothing really new here, just what I said yesterday. Seeker has been removed. They feel that they haven't been able to hit the right mark with either Phase 1 or Phase 2, so they've decided to kind of take it out completely and rework it for a later date. So for the time being, no new gear set. As for Reclaimer, in combination with the support station range increase that we'll speak about in a second in the kind of skills section, they've reduced the support station range bonus of this set in order to kind of balance out with the new changes. So set bonus number 3 will now give you plus 30% support station range instead of plus 50%. But what this basically now means is if you combine this with the skill power change we're about to speak about, you can now get a range of 9.75 meters as opposed to the previous 9 meters in PTS 2. Then moving on to skill balance, there's quite a lot here, so I'm going to try and rush through it as quickly as possible. If you guys do want to read it in depth, of course, again, you can find a link down below. Skill power, they have further reduced the impact of skill power on skill cooldowns. This basically means that, compared to PTS 2, players with lower skill power will have slightly shorter cooldowns, and players with higher skill power will still have slightly longer ones. The goal is to make skill haste the go-to stat for cooldown reduction. The skill haste cap has now been reduced from 60% to 50%. For Pulse, they've reduced the impact of skill power on critical hit chance and critical hit damage. And Tactical Scanner specifically, critical hit chance increased is now plus 20% and critical hit damage reduced is negative 11%. For First Aid, Self and Ally Heal has been increased by 15% on all mods. They've reduced the impact of skill power on Self and Ally Heal by 20% on all mods. And for Booster Shot, damage mitigation bonuses have decreased by 50% from 15 to 7.5%. Mobile Cover, for all the mods, the base cooldown has been increased by 33%. Seeker Mine, as spoken about yesterday, for the Cluster mod, there will no longer be a stagger effect. Stagger will still be present on the base, Seeker Mine and the other variants, but just not for Cluster. They've also reduced the explosive damage from each mine, but they've then taken some of that damage and put it into the bleed that is caused afterwards, so you still, technically speaking, dish out the same damage, but it's just spread through a different way, so you won't have quite as much impact from the initial explosion. And as for all mods, they have also increased the base cooldown by 17%. Smart Cover's damage resilience has been decreased by 33%. They've also reduced the impact of skill power on damage resilience, and all mods, the base cooldown has now been increased by 9%. For Sticky Bomb, the Disruptor version will now detonate with no delay. For Support Station, the range has been increased by 25% from 6 meters to 7.5 meters, which, as mentioned, goes hand in hand with the Reclaimer changes. The Reclaimer range bonus has gone down, the Support Station range has gone up, so there's kind of a happy medium in between. They've also implemented a 1 second cooldown to support station heal procs, and the idea behind this is that if you stack several support stations, it won't then heal that same player more than once. And then finally for Turret, the base skill and the active sensor range has been decreased from 35 meters to 25 meters. For all mods except Shock, the base health has been reduced by 25%, and for all mods, the skill power impact on health has been reduced. After that, a quick note on contamination events. They've added additional veteran flamers and rushers in all contamination event encounters, and they've also dropped the contamination drain on players' health by 2/3. For loot and vendors, your Phoenix credit cap has now been increased from 2,000 Phoenix credits to 5,000, which should make buying things a hell of a lot easier if you want to kind of stockpile credits. And then finally, there's a few changes to bug fixes. One of the most important things, the Delta issues that have been plaguing people trying to play Last Stand, have largely been resolved, so hopefully you should have a much cleaner experience. So, those are pretty much the patch notes. Those are the slightly more granular changes. So again, as always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I've just finished downloading PTS 3 myself, so I'm going to be diving in, doing some testing, trying out some of these new changes, and I'll of course give you guys some feedback from there. So for the time being, thank you for watching. If there's anything you guys want me to cover while having access to the PTS, again, let me know. But until then, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.